welcome back to another episode of GRIT Unleashed, where we tackle today together so tomorrow can be ours. I'm your host, Sarah, and yeah, it's been a while. Sometimes life gets in the way or we're busy. But anyway, here at UT2, the UT2 team, and GRIT Unleashed, we just appreciate your patience and your understanding for the little break that needed to happen in August. So here we are in September, and this month is Suicide Awareness Month. And today I am joined by Dr. Lance Cutsforth, who is a former snake eater and current total badass holistic doctor.
Only the occasional snake back in the day.
The occasional snake. And you've told me before that tastes like chicken, right? Chopped up, mashed up, put them in a stew.
Absolutely.
So, Lance, why don't you tell the audience just a little bit about yourself, kind of your background? I think our discussion with Nacho earlier was that most of our listeners are military, whether current or in the past, but we do have some non-military, but most of them are emergency services of some sort. So just tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure, sure. And your audience are my favorite people and those that I feel most called to work with and serve. So I'm a double board certified doctor of functional medicine. I also hold an MBA. I have an undergrad in aeronautical engineering. And all of that just means that I went to school for a long time and learned a few things and unlearned a lot of things, especially coming up through the holistic path to be a doctor of functional medicine. That actually happened later in life after my military service and seeing the what we'll call the lack of progress with standard Western medicine in addressing the issues that our brothers and sisters face both during their military or first responder service, and then really afterwards is when it really comes to light because we no longer have the community that we had when we were enduring those situations. Previous to that, I did enlist. I ended up on a special forces team. I was communication sergeant. And that was way back in the day when we were doing counter drug operations down in Colombia in the late 80s. Uncle Sam was kind enough to give me a scholarship. And so I went, took the green to gold route. I went to Embry-Riddle, where I got my degree in aeronautical engineering with a minor in psychology, and then went back in as an infantry officer. And I did that for a number of years to include deployment to Bosnia to enforce the Dayton Peace Accord and sorting out all of the attempted genocide and trauma that really engulfed that whole country. Did some entrepreneurial things, had some successes, some abysmal failures, and then did a lot of veteran advocacy work and recognized the blaring gap between what was needed and what was being provided through the VA. Vowed to myself that I was going to do something about it, but I wasn't going to take the traditional route. So I came up through a more holistic pathway to get here. And so, I utilize everything that I learned along the way to include my own personal experiences struggling with complex PTS, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, alcoholism, all of those things I lived through, and now can resource back into those experiences to help people where they are and help guide them to where they need to go from a place of lived experience.
I absolutely love that. And I've seen a holistic doctor, I think only twice now in my life, but I really love the whole aspect of treating the person rather than the symptoms. And I was listening to your previous podcast about one of the blips in there that you talked about is like gut health. And I have done so much research on gut health, and it is so important. And to me, it's one of the most neglected parts of our bodies that we just totally take for granted, and people don't realize how much they could change about themselves if they just paid attention to the gut health. And I really just think that's a really cool aspect of the holistic medicine. And you said you majored in aeronautical engineering at Embry-Riddle. That is what I'm doing my master's in right now.
Oh, no kidding. Are you going through Embry-Riddle or
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going through
oh,
Embry-Riddle and
awesome.
doing online.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I went to that is so cool. I went to the Prescott campus if I'd gone to the Daytona campus, I'd probably still be working on my undergrad degree. There were entirely too many distractions. I knew myself well enough when I came back out of the military that I needed to go someplace with fewer distractions to be able to move forward. Um,
Yes, absolutely. It is
but
Daytona.
yeah, uh, so congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. So, remind me again how long you've been practicing this holistic medicine, just in the number of years that you've been doing it.
There's an asterisk there because yeah, as far as working in the mental wellness space, that goes back to when I was 15 years old, in practicing in, we'll call it non-Western modalities then as well. So growing up, yeah, I didn't have the best home life, which, resonates with about 95% of the spec ops and first responder population that I work with.
Hmm.
And so I went into Boy Scouts, seeing structure, seeing rewards for behaviors and all of those things. I really craved that support and some positive male role models. And one of those was actually an elder from the Nez Perce people who refer to themselves as the people, and in northern Idaho. And Elmer Crow was his name, and he recognized, I think the situation that I was in, and he really took me under his wing, and he taught me a lot of indigenous ways, gathering food, gathering plant medicine, gathering resources, tracking, fishing traditional ways, hunting traditional ways, how to build shelter, how to make a fire that doesn't make smoke, all of these incredible teachings. And then when I made Eagle Scout, I was one of the youngest Eagle Scouts in the state of Idaho at the time. After that was awarded, he said, "Well, okay, it's time for you to go on your vision quest." And so he took me through, a traditional vision quest. I fasted for 3 days. He took me through a sacred sweat ceremony and then out into the woods for me to find my Wyakin or my spirit guide. And so I was out in the woods for 3 days, which in itself was, the sweat was transcendental. And being out in the woods was truly transformative. And my spirit guide presented itself to me, and then I came back, and our school had a rash of suicides, and so they put together a program where they asked, um, each little clique or group, who do you talk to when you're having rough times? And those of us that rose to the top of those lists were taken, and we were given the opportunity to become certified peer specialists as teenagers. And so we went through an 80-hour CPS course, 40 hours of didactic and 40 hours of practicum. And then we embedded into our student population as peer support. And we had no suicides from the time that was enacted until I graduated. And I don't know if the program continued, but it was incredibly innovative and highly effective in providing support amongst our peer group. So that really started my path in this space. And then throughout the military, I always volunteered for the additional courses to learn about how to identify drug use, how to identify spousal abuse, how to recognize stressful and errant behaviors. When I was a TAC officer at Officer Candidate School, we went through a very extensive training on how to, the psychology of, quote, breaking people down and rebuilding them, which was really, creating peak emotional experiences so we could create pliability and psyche to modify behavior patterns. So really, it goes back to when I was 15 years old. As far as the formal education for the holistic medicines, really that started around 2010, working both with the holistic approach as well as utilizing other plant medicines. I worked utilizing cannabis to help military veterans wean off of opiates and synthetic pharmaceuticals. Yeah, cannabis is far more effective than methadone in helping people wean off of their opiate addictions. And we did that very underground back in 2010, even though I lived in California at the time and it was more permissive there. So those are those are kind of some high points as far as, movement into this space.
And just to think that you've just been doing all that since you were 15. And I totally agree that you don't have to have a degree per se. You don't have to have that piece of paper that makes you an expert in something, especially as something like health related. One, because my personal opinion is like health is so individualized, which is why there's such a need for non-Western medicine, holistic medicine, like you practice, but also like there's so many different ways because the human body is so unique and each person is unique. And a lot of health and wellness can also be changed based on people's like whole perception and their mental health and their whole idea of what health is.
I agree 100%. If we approach health not just as this biological vehicle that we're riding around in, but really a three-legged stool. So we've got the physical, physiological, which is one leg of the stool. We've got our mental, emotional, spiritual, or mental, emotional, psychological, which is the second leg of the stool. And then our spiritual slash community is the third leg of the stool. And that's not talking religious dogma. It's just talking being plugged into something bigger than yourself vertically, and then plugged into supportive community laterally, like-minded people. And we need all three of those for us to be truly well. And so much of our identity is tied up into what's going on with the physical body. And we've been conditioned for at least the past 150 years that the pill will fix you. There is the silver bullet, and I'll just take this pill and you'll feel better. Don't look at the four other side effects that you're going to have from this, and the four other medications you're going to have to take to offset the side effects of this first pill. There's been a very there's been a shift towards this concept of magic pill, and it doesn't exist. Didn't exist in our ancestry. It doesn't exist now. It's an illusion that unfortunately we've been conditioned to buy into. And I also 100% agree with you that we're each our own unique individual. There is no assembly line for health. We're all a custom build, and we all need a different array of tools to help us optimize our physical health, our mental health, and our spiritual health. And all three play an equal role. If you remember back to when you were a kid and you walked into your middle school science class and realize, oh, I forgot to study for the test today, and you feel that sinking feeling in your stomach. Well, that's a thought that evoked a physical response. And so there's no denying that there's interconnectivity. Or if you have a beautiful spiritual experience, whether it's at church or whether it's out in nature or something that really just touches you, and your heart feels warm and full. Well, there's nothing physically that happened. That was a spiritual experience that elicited a somatic response. So just those two examples show absolute interconnectivity between these things, and you know for us to believe that taking a pill is going to somehow fix what's going on with in our mental state is like believing that rotating the tires on your car is somehow going to fix a glitch in the CPU. We've got to bring proper resources to address the proper aspects of our health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say all that and I don't necessarily mean that, oh, everybody if they just change their mindset, they're going to be all right. I do believe that there are some people that have, innate chemical imbalances, but I think with, this might be a little bit inflammatory for our listeners out there, but I'm especially because like I'm all about mental health, but I really just think that so many people don't take accountability for their own responsibility in making their mental health better because it's hard, right? Like mental health and getting through dark times and the things that are hard in life are just that. They're hard, they're difficult, they're uncomfortable. There are times that we don't want to look at because they're scary and we don't know what to do without that dark part of ourselves. And, sometimes I wonder, that they have the phrase out there that misery loves company, right? And you might want to bring people down around you, or, you just latch on to that misery so tightly because that's what's comfortable. You don't know what that's from, or you don't know where it came from, but that's just where you are right then and there. So tackling those head on is really important. And I really think that it's a mindset in today's generation that is, my generation too, because, I'm an older millennial, but a millennial. And, with Gen Z and everybody else coming in, like they don't want to take the responsibility for their own well-being. And I think there was something else that you said in your podcast with Mike Bledsoe was the difference between intrinsically and extrinsically motivated. And I really just thought that was a really great way to put that is I think not even just for military people, but for so many people as they have been, extrinsically motivated by people around them, their parents saying, "Great job, here's your participation trophy," that they never looked on the inside of themselves to push themselves forward through a dark time.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing up the last podcast and also how I approach this space, and it's a combination of different theories. I utilize Dick Schwartz's IFS, internal family systems, quite a bit. I bring in Shirzad Shamin's positive intelligence system as well because that's very helpful. Tony Robbins and Rod Hairston's positive conditioning models to help people navigate. Dick Schwartz with IFS, he wrote a beautiful book called No Bad Parts, and it talks about the different aspects of ourselves and the concept that self with a capital S is our soul, our spirit, that which occupies this biological vehicle that we're driving around in. And then to navigate the experience here, we develop different parts. And those parts have different roles. I mean, we've got exiles, and typically exiles are, I call them the little wounded ones. Those are the ones that were faced with situations that they did not have the capacity to properly navigate. And so we can call that a peak emotional experience. And sometimes peak emotional experiences get really, really big when we're faced with abuse or we're faced with neglect or we're faced with things that we don't have the emotional and mental maturity or capability to deal with. And so then that part of us becomes very, very hurt and very wounded. And so other parts are then spun up that we call protectors. And those are managers or firefighters. They break into those two categories. And so during that peak emotional experience, these aspects of our personality facets, if you will, based on the available tools that are around us. So and then based on how well those tools work to help us navigate those peak emotional experiences determines how worn the handles on those particular tools become for us to use them. So for example, we're little, we're told not to get into the cookie jar. But boy, we had just experienced bliss by having a cookie, and we know how great that is. And so now we're going to explore, we're going to navigate, even though we were told no, we're going to go put our hand in the cookie jar and pull out a cookie. And then we get caught. And we're asked, did you get into the cookie jar? And we've got a mouthful of cookie and crumbs and chocolate on our face and crumbs all over our hands. And so we've got a couple of different choices. We can deny it, so we can try dishonesty and shake our head no. We can break into tears, and fawn and beg for mercy. We can just jump down and run and try to hide. We can get combative. Yeah, there are different tools, and when we're little people, or we can reach into the cookie jar and offer one to share, to the parent that's holding us accountable. So So we'll try different things based on what we've seen modeled for us. And then whichever things work, we tend to adopt in as our go-tos to navigate space. And some of those tools are have a level of productivity, and some are not particularly productive. And so as we go through life, we're faced with more peak emotional experiences. When we're little, most everything's a peak emotional experience. That's why our psyche is so pliable. And then we start building these patterns for how we navigate space. And as we get older, it takes a little more to create a peak emotional experience. And maybe we're 13 years old and we're sitting in class, and and the cute girl across the classroom passes us a note and lets us know she thinks we're cute. So now blissful peak emotional experience. And okay, how do I optimize this? And so maybe we start showering once a day instead of once a week, and we discover Axe body spray, maybe too much of it, but we're still now, but it's a behavior modification because we're trying to navigate this new experience. And then she breaks up with us, and then we discover black clothes and listening to Blue October and being, very emo. Again, new patterns based on peak emotional experiences. So we work our way through life, but it's only based on the tools that are available to us, as well as the ability to learn how to use those tools. When we go into the military, basic training is an extended peak emotional experience. Or if we go to a service academy, or we go to a firefighter academy, peak emotional experiences to create pliability so that new patterns can be introduced. And then there's repetitions to make sure those patterns lock down. And in many cases, if we were already externally motivated, externally focused, because that was our conditioning and our upbringing, that tends to be further reinforced when we go into military or first responder service. Because, and along the way, unfortunately, sometimes service and sacrifice get conflated or collapsed. The definition collapses, and we somehow feel like we're not truly serving unless we're sacrificing, because that's what we've been indoctrinated to believe. And that leads to a lot of burnout within our population. So we pick up patterns to help us navigate really tough things. And, we watch our buddy or a squad get, taken out by an IED. How do we navigate that peak emotional experience? Well, by and large, we can't go talk to mental wellness because if we do, then we're going to be sidelined. Our career is in jeopardy. As much as we're told it's not, it is, because we see other people grabbing for the cheese in the rat trap, and we see what happens to them. So, oh, I can't do that. Well, alcohol is pretty readily available, and I'm going to lean into using that because it's accepted and it's available. And so that self-soothes for a while, and then that gets locked in as a behavior pattern. And then we start that downward spiral. Or maybe it's pornography, or maybe it's errant behavior, or maybe it's going out and getting in fights in bars so that we can just let out the pain and the rage. There are different patterns that we adopt. And so when our psyche cools down, those patterns get locked into our subconscious, into our amygdala. And so it's what we call a sympathetic nervous system response. And so that's your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, or fornicate. There are 5 F's to the vagus nerve response. And so we lean into those because that is our reptilian brain, our amygdala is saying, okay, this is what we've done up until now to survive. We're going to keep doing this thing. And our amygdala doesn't have a moral scale, doesn't have a moral compass, and it's not thinking about the future. It's just thinking about right here and now. How do I survive? And it does so by, well, what have I done up until now to survive? Keep doing that. And then that puts us in conflict with our prefrontal cortex, where our conscious mind sits, that has our moral scale, our wisdom, our forward looking, our empathy, our compassion, or where the parasympathetic resides. And so that conflict is what causes so much in distress in us internally. And ultimately, it's not moral failure, it's not lack of motivation, it's not lack of uh, of of determination. It's just lack of understanding. How do we reprogram the subconscious to get out of these patterns? How do we drop the survival tools and pick up thrive tools? That's really where the focus needs to be. It's not, a pill's not going to do that. And this comes back to your point, Sarah, as far as us taking accountability. We need to recognize, okay, I've got these errant behavior patterns and they keep coming up. I need to find somebody to coach me or guide me, teach me. Everything we've done in life has been through example. So why should this be any different? So yeah, we do need to take accountability. Nobody put a bottle to my lips. Nobody, put that gun to my head. I did that all by myself. And so we need to recognize, oh, okay, there's some things going on. The autopilot is on and it's flying me someplace other than where I want to go. So I need to grab control of the handles and not expect somebody else to do that for me. So yeah, first step is accountability. Second step is forgiveness of self. The past doesn't exist anymore. We can't change the past. We can't rearrange the deck furniture on the Titanic. All we can do is recognize and learn from it, make amends, and move forward. But and so yeah, it all comes back to having that level of self awareness and being able to reach out and say help.
On that, what do you think makes somebody more likely to be able to self-identify or reach out for help? Is it just a simple answer of, well, it's just the support system you have, or is it something a little bit more complicated, or maybe a blending of both of those aspects?
Well, like we identified earlier in the conversation, we're each unique. We're each our own unique blend of experiences. We each have 100 billion brain cells that are unique to us. So really, and the other part is, some of us will self isolate or will justify a lot of these patterns because those are some of the protectors that the managers and firefighters that we've created to continue moving forward. So I don't know that there's one set answer or even a couple of answers. Really, for us to, if we've got the capacity, we sit down and say, "Ooh, yeah, I'm not really happy with how that last interaction went," and getting to a point of self-awareness to where it's not, well, they did this to me, self-justification. It's really starting off with self-love, not self-indulgence. A lot of times, we people will mistake self-love for self-indulgence, and self-indulgence is really just justification for current patterns that hurt other people. That's not self-love. We would classify as narcissism. Self-love is recognizing, oh, okay, there's some areas where I need to improve, and I love myself enough to make those improvements, and then by doing so, I'm going to be a better person for those people around me. Getting to that point is challenging. Sometimes it's a loved one just holding space as we're dealing through our pain and saying, well, hey, how can I best support you? Sometimes it's an intervention if we're seeing behaviors that are completely out of control. Sometimes it's plugging into community and finding like-minded people that hold accountability and love. Some people wield accountability like a weapon, and that tends to scare us away. We don't want to be beaten down further. We want to be supported. So, if you recognize it in yourself and something's challenging here, then the next step is finding a supportive community of brothers and sisters that get it. So finding we've got one of the organizations that we're a part of is the Heroes Wellness Collective. It's a great little app that you can download on your phone, and there are lots of like-minded people there. There's reaching out to a spouse or a support person saying, "Oh, I'm really struggling here. Can you help me?" So I think, yeah, if it all had to come back to it is just that four-letter word, help. You either say it to yourself, say it to somebody else, and then start looking for community that can provide you support. Those are some of the first steps that I think, get us heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and with help, what are some things, I guess some advice or some ways that you might be able to offer, to myself and our listeners on how to be better assistance for people that might need help. I mean, we've all heard the stories of, how to identify if somebody might be having these suicidal ideations, but how do we encourage our friends and our family and our loved ones to want to be able to come to us for help, if we aren't actually struggling with those ourselves?
Well, I think the first thing when people are have suicidal ideation, it is actually a coping mechanism, and this may sound a little contrary to popular belief, but having worked with hundreds of people that express suicidal ideation, I can tell you, well-intended people that are like, "Oh, just promise me you won't commit suicide. Promise me you won't commit suicide," actually creates stress on the person that's ruminating.
Hmm.
Because for them it's a safety net. It is an option. Doesn't mean they're ever going to use the option, but think about walking a tightrope with a safety net or without a safety net. It's the same rope, but just having the comfort of the 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 safety net underneath gives us a lot more confidence. And as contrary as it sounds, having the ability to ruminate is a level of comfort. So when, if a therapist says, well, I need you to sign this letter that says, this commitment that you're not going to commit suicide while I work with you, that's creating more stress on the system.
That feels stressful to me,
What
even
need
just hearing that.
Well, right. It's like, well, I'll work. I know you're suicidal, but for me to work with you, you need to sign this commitment. Well, that's not addressing the issue. That's covering your own ass. And and our deep self knows, okay, this person isn't looking out for me. They're looking out for themselves. And so that actually creates mistrust in the relationship, in the therapeutic relationship. So what we can do is when somebody expresses suicidal ideation, the first thing we can do is remain calm, give them a safe place and say, "Hey, I hear you. Okay, so you're really struggling here. Do you want to tell me about it?" And and I'm not going to judge. So loving kindness. Yeah, and you'll hear me say that a lot. Loving kindness. And loving kindness is not weak for anybody. That's what the world needs. That's what we're designed to provide when, when we're not traumatized. And so, gosh, I'm really struggling. Well, all right, let's sit down. Let's have a cup of coffee. Tell me what's going on. And no judgment. Just let people have a safe place to get things up and out. You don't have to be a PhD. You just need to have a heart and just let that heart come forward and not be scared and just say, all right, I got you. Tell me what's going on. And then just listen. No judgment. Don't try to fix anything. The first place is creating a safe place. And then it's okay, so how can I support you? So safe safe place to unpack, and then just supportive questions. How can I support you? Well, I need $50,000 to, well, I can't do that for you. How can I support you emotionally? Because most things that come up reactively are coming from a place of fear. And so if you can hold that space of listening, okay, well, I can't really do that for you, but I'm here and I'm someplace safe for you to come and talk. So being that safe place, and it's what we call co-regulating the space. So if you feel safe, then their sympathetic nervous system, just by being in proximity with somebody that's calm, is going to start calming down. And then while you're listening, if you can take nice, slow, gentle breaths while that person is talking. So again, don't try to fix it, don't try to judge it. Just hold the space, be grounded and slow, controlled breathing. And how can I support you? That is, that is the best thing that anybody can do for anybody that's dysregulated.
Yeah, sorry. I'm like ruminating on that, like thinking about how I think you said already, like people always want to try to fix things. They always want to be, presented with a problem. They're like, oh my gosh, well, let me fix you. Well, the last thing that somebody who's struggling with something like that wants to know is that they're broken. They don't want, or at least, I do not struggle with suicidal ideations. However, whenever I'm having a hard time, I don't want to know that I'm broken. I already think that I'm broken, but I also don't want to be told that I'm, oh, you're stronger than this and you can get this together. I just want somebody to be there for me. I just want somebody to listen and to know that I'm heard and to know that at least somebody cares. So, I think that's something that's at least hard for me on my part is I always try to offer advice where I'm like, oh, well, here's my unsolicited advice that I'm going to give you. And it's like sometimes I can catch it from the other person if they're like, oh, great. Well, like, here's that advice. And then, sometimes I get it right, but I think a lot of people want to try to fix things whenever a lot of times people don't want to try to be fixed right in that moment. They just want to know that somebody cares.
Yeah, 100%. And there was a word in there, and that was unsolicited. And I appreciate you having awareness to recognize that. And it's true. I see it more in guys, where we go into fix-it mode, because we tend to be linear thinkers, and uh, ladies tend to be more parallel thinkers, and that goes back to deep into our ancestry. But so, yeah, in a lot of the work we do with couples, a lot of times, the spouse, the wife of the relationship just wants to be heard. They want to vent. So Amy and I, my wife and I, we worked out a little code to where if she just needs to vent, she makes a V with her fingers and she puts it on her shoulder as she's talking. And so I know, oh, all I have to do is listen. I don't have to solve a damn thing here. I just need to be supportive. And she vents, and then after she's unpacked what she needs to unpack and feels heard and seen, then I say, so how can I best support you? So then I'm not coming in with unsolicited advice. I'm asking her in her, to claim her sovereignty, because this is also empowering, because I'm not coming in and doing it for her. I'm asking her, how can I best support you? So she has a say in what's coming, as opposed to me dictating to her, well, this is what I think you should do. And so in many times unsolicited advice falls into that category. It really ends up stripping people of their internal motivation, because we're providing external motivation to direct a behavior. Well intentioned. I don't think any advice given is from malice. But if it's not invited, then that's not a part of the healing journey for that person. Um, they, there needs to be an awareness. There needs to be an ask for help. Well, hey, do you think you could help me with dot dot dot? And then on the flip side, the person that's offering the help has the opportunity to say, "Oh, I don't know that I can do that. Is there another way I could support you?" Or, yeah, I've got that, but I don't have capacity right now. So now we're creating a very healthy, supportive interaction versus a judge and jury. Well, I think you should do this. Well, so then that's coming from a place of judgment, even though well intended, and then dictatory as far as, well, you need to do this, instead of exploratory of, well, I don't know, let's talk about this. Let's see where this can go. So and we sometimes offer unsolicited response, one, because we're eager to help, and two, because we don't always like sitting in discomfort with somebody else. Oh, this doesn't feel good, I want to fix it. And instead of, wow, I'm just going to sit here with you for a minute, and I'm going to show compassion and just hold that space. So, compassion and empathy are tools that not everybody's real accustomed to using, but we need a lot more of.
Yeah. One of the points that you hit on was having the capacity to help. And that's one thing that my husband and I have recently had a conversation with. So we just celebrated 10 years of marriage last month. And, he's always very willing to help. I'm always very willing to help. But, because we're people, sometimes we don't always meet up to that expectation that the other person expects. And then because we've set those expectations, or maybe myself or maybe my husband has set those expectations but not told me, that's a whole nother conversation for another day, I think. But um they fall short, and then it's like, well, why didn't you help me when I asked? And then it comes out, well, oh, I'm not in the place to help you. If I think in the beginning, if people recognize that it's okay to not help in the capacity that's asked, but to help in a capacity, whatever that might be, I think that's okay. Because I think even if you could help just a little bit, just make the world 10% better. You don't have to make it 100% better or 90% better. Or, we've had this conversation of, you're not sacrificing enough for your service, because those things are not two of the same word, they're two different words. I think if we recognize that it's okay to help just a little, to make the journey for that or the other person just a little easier to get back to healthy mental health, I think that's okay. And I think along with realizing that not every situation needs to be fixed, I think those two things coupled together will really take people a long way.
I agree. And some of the work we do is help people understand, yeah, we've got different systems or frameworks that we can look at things. So when we are looking at exchange with others, there are four major categories. That the first is demand or entitlement. The second is equal exchange. The third is gift. And the fourth is contribution or anonymous gift. And so if we go back into demand or entitlement, we all start off that way. We come out of the womb and we are helpless. And so we demand food, we demand sleep, we demand to be changed when we're wet or dirty. We don't have the capability of doing it ourselves. And so we are appropriately in a state of demand or entitlement. And a baby expects to be fed. Well, that's a realistic expectation for a baby. And then as we move up in our awareness, then we start learning equal exchange. Well, Sarah, if you get all your homework done, you can go out and play with your friends. Or, hey, if you eat all your dinner, you can have a dessert. Or, hey, if you go mow the lawn, you get $10. So we learn, or hey, if you study, you get good grades. So we're starting to learn these exchanges, and as we expand our awareness in the world. In depending on how we're raised or how we're trained, we still have some things where we feel entitled. And entitlement typically comes in undisclosed conditions to an equal exchange. And it gets even trickier is because the third is gift. So gift is I give because it makes me feel good, and it helps me fulfill what I believe is what I'm doing, what I'm supposed to be doing here in the world. And so true gift is as soon as it leaves your hands, you have no control over it anymore, and you're okay because you got the benefit as soon as you gave it. And then contribution is anonymous gift, where we're just giving to the world because the rising tide lifts all boats. The challenge we get into is when we believe we're in gift, but there are undisclosed clauses. It's not really a gift. We are in equal. We believe that we're in gift, but we're actually in exchange. But we haven't disclosed clauses to the exchange. And so, well, I gave that to you. Yeah, and sure, that was great. Thank you. Well, how come you haven't used it? I gave it to you. That was a gift. That was an exchange because you had an expectation back as to what would come from that interaction. So if we can get really real about, yeah, if we can say, I'm giving you this gift, my expectation is that you're going to use this. Does that feel okay to you? Yes or no? If it's a no, okay, well then the gift doesn't have to be given. if it's not going to be, if the disclosed exchange isn't going to be honored. And I know this feels a little different. It might feel a little clunky and awkward, and in the beginning it is, but if we're giving something with an expectation that is undisclosed, then that's not a gift. That's bait. That's bait to be able to drop into a sense of entitlement. And that's not healthy for relationships. So circling back to what you were saying before, as far as being able to contribute to each other, you know, we agree what those contributions look like. And we agree, hey, if I'm going to come to you and say, I have something that I'd like to talk about. Do you have capacity? And if it's no, I don't have capacity. Okay, could we set a time when we do have capacity, so that this can be addressed? Now we're honoring each other's capabilities and still honoring ourselves at the same time. So how's that landing, Sarah?
It makes total sense to me because, like I said, at times, as spouses might do, and I'm probably more guilty of it than Brandon, my husband, is, where I don't intend to have an expectation behind the things that I do, but because of, cultural norms, societal norms, things I was raised on, whatever it may be, like you said, you give a gift, it's like, well, are you going to wear that shirt I got you? Or are you going to like play with that computer game that I got you, or whatever it might be? It's like, well, it's not supposed to be that way. It's a gift. And as someone in the church, we talk about God's mercy. Mercy was given from God for free with no expectations. That's a gift because he didn't expect anything from us back. And that should be the same that we apply for gifting things. And when we gift things like our time to somebody who needs them, it's not because we expect it back. It's because we just care for that person.
Mhm. And speaking of the church, I think one of the most overlooked, but one of the most significant verses in the Bible is when Christ was asked, Rabbi, what is the greatest of the commandments? And he responded, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love each other as you love yourself. Those four words oftentimes get overlooked or they get reduced or minimized, but ultimately self-love, and again, not narcissistic self-indulgence, but self-love, we're called to have that because I had a great pastor in Columbus, Georgia when I was stationed at Fort Benning, and he had all these great little one-liners that just made so much sense. And he would say, "Well, what's down in the well comes up in the bucket," meaning you only have the capacity to love to the extent that you love yourself. And if you're not taking care of you, then how can you effectively take care of others? Leaky lifeboats have a hard time rescuing people. There needs to be that maintenance and that care so that you can, if you're operating at your highest efficiency, you're far more productive in relationship with everyone else than if you're running yourself dry over and over again. So I appreciate you kind of directing us into that place because unfortunately, I think when we get into the place of service, we conflate it with sacrifice and we run ourselves down and somehow feel guilty if we're serving, but it's not somehow costing us. And unfortunately, there are some that will weaponize those good intentions against us. And I've lived through some moral trauma from some of my church experiences, and I recognize people, and we're fallible. But unfortunately, there have been times when people have weaponized those beautiful intentions. Well, Jesus sacrificed for you, so you need to be sacrificing for other people to the point that it hurts. He suffered in the garden and he hung on a cross, without a doubt. That absolutely so. he also lived 33 years beautifully and did wonderful things. And so we need to make sure that we're balancing, our care of self and not allowing ourselves to be subjugated to somebody else's view of how we should be sacrificing or serving. That's an individual choice. We have sovereignty and we have a direct relationship with God. When Christ died, the curtain separating the inner temple from the Holy of Holies was split from the top down. That was to signify that we each get to have our own personal relationship with God or higher power, whatever we want to call that. Not through another person, but ours individually. So anyhow, we went off on a bit of a tangent, but it just comes back to self-love. We need to love ourselves in a nurturing and positive way. The same love that we give to others, that there needs to be an equal amount for ourselves so that we can be better for others.
Yeah, you keep bringing up the differenti how do I say that? Differentiation of between self-love, but not the narcissistic kind. Can you expound a little bit on that? Because I think, at least again for myself, just speaking from personal experience, I know that like for one, I would never talk to my friends the way that I've talked to myself sometimes. As I've gotten older, I've gotten a little bit better every day about it. But there are times whenever I'm like, man, like, well, I don't want to just like be cocky. I don't want to be narcissistic. So I'm going to put myself down a little bit. And I know I'm not the only one in the world that struggles like that. So what kind of, words of wisdom can you offer for people like me and our other listeners out there that we're afraid of crossing that line into something a little more sinister whenever we really just want to like, gas ourselves up a little bit and make ourselves feel a little bit better?
No, then that's a great question. And ultimately, if we look at, we've got the scale of good and evil, right? And the shades of gray in between. What I would offer for contemplation is that line stretches even further, and it stretches to love and fear. If we look at love, and in fact, in Aramaic, the word God and the word love had the same numeric value, which is interesting and a topic for another conversation. But so if we look at love, the children of love are things like compassion and empathy and wisdom and all of those things that we categorize as good. Those are actually the children of love. And then the other end of the spectrum, we have fear. And the child of fear is control. And the children of control are coveting and lust and hate and envy and all of those things, the deadly sins, the things that we categorize as evil. So fear is not evil. Some of the byproducts of fear are evil. Fear keeps this biological vehicle alive, and that's what fires off our vagus nerve response for our fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So when we're feeling like we want to say something, so if we can kind of sit for a second and say, okay, is this coming from a place of control or fear? Or is this coming from a place of love and loving kindness? Am I looking to bring this forward to honor myself and also provide resource for people around me? Or am I doing this because I feel like I need to step up over the top of somebody? Or conversely, by me shining my light, am I being too bright for the people around me? And so if you are suppressing your genuineness and your goodness for fear that others might not appreciate it, well, that's their journey, not yours. On the flip side, if you're doing it just to pump yourself up and maybe step on the backs of others to elevate yourself, well, then that's not appropriate because again, that's climbing on somebody else from a place of control, which is based in fear. So, and I know this maybe sounds maybe not as practical, but really it's determining where your motivation's coming from. We tend to make ourselves smaller to fit in. And, when we're making ourselves smaller to fit in, we tend to spiral down instead of spiraling up. And so being able to step into those things, that we're good at and that it's like, yeah, you know what, I'm a really good friend. And it's okay to say that because I'm not putting down those that aren't good friends. I'm just honoring the fact I'm a really good friend and I'm there for people and I get to appreciate that about myself. So, as far as practical things we can do, there are great little tools. There's an app that you can download on your phone. It's called I Am, and it just goes through positive affirmations. And so you're claiming things in the present because your subconscious doesn't hear humor, it doesn't hear sarcasm, it just hears what you say. And so if you say, "Oh, I'm a hot mess today," it kind of jokingly, yeah, the amygdala, the subconscious doesn't have a sense of humor. It just hears, "I am a hot mess today." And so then it starts emulating that behavior. So the more positivity you can speak into your life about yourself, the more you're going to continue to condition yourself to be in that state of mind.
Yeah. Well, and all that makes total sense too of like it's always the intention behind things, at least when it comes to yourself. Not everybody else outside of your own body and mind will know your intentions or even feel your intentions or maybe even care about your intentions. But for you and your own peace, I think intentions are important there. So Lance, as our time here is coming to a close, do you have any other final closing remarks? This has been a great interview, by the way. I've loved chatting with you today.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and I've really enjoyed it as well. I, closing remarks because we are in suicide awareness. E- Again, the biggest advice I can give is if you're feeling things coming up, find a safe person to just talk to. Not looking for answers, just find some place to be able to lean and be safe. The more you can do to build a sense of safety around you, the more we can get to a point where we can explore other options, yeah, other than that ultimate safety net. Um, and then for those that are in a supportive role, keep yourself calm, provide that safe place for that person to come. Don't judge, don't try to solve, just be there and listen. And when all of it is able to come up and out, say, how can I best support you? And there are resources out there. Again, Heroes Wellness Collective has a suicide hotline, text line that folks can tap into. I imagine there are other organizations that can be posted wherever this podcast is being posted that can give additional resources to provide some of that intervention care if it's needed.
Yeah, and if you're listening and someone you know or even yourself are struggling with suicidal ideations, you can always dial the suicide hotline at 988 and know that we here at UT2 and the whole team of GRIT Unleashed, we are here for you and we will provide the safe space for you to be able to approach your mental health head on and get through whatever demons you're fighting because that's what we're here for in the first place. So, Lance, again, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I look forward to any other future interviews we might get to talk about because I'd really like to pick your brain about gut health, but that is all the time that we have today. So, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.